At my son's wedding rehearsal dinner, my daughter-in-law looked at the seating chart, crossed out my name from the family table, and said, "You're at table 9 with the cousins." I smiled and nodded. She didn't know I had already changed the will that morning. Good evening, dear friends. This is Tessa. I'm so glad you found your way here. Before I begin, please take a moment to like this video and tell me in the comments what city or town you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. I want to tell you something that happened to me over the past 2 years, something I am still, even now, making sense of. It starts with a rehearsal dinner in a banquet hall in Phoenix and ends somewhere I never expected to find myself, sitting on a terrace in Portugal watching the sun drop into the Atlantic, completely, genuinely at peace. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Tessa. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed social worker in Tucson, Arizona, helping families in crisis. I say that not to brag, but because there is a particular kind of irony in spending your career teaching people to recognize manipulation and exploitation, and then failing to see it happening in your own kitchen. My late husband, Frank, and I had one son. My son has his father's dark eyes and his father's laugh, and for most of his life he had his father's generous heart too. We weren't wealthy people. Frank drove a truck for a regional delivery company. I worked county services, but we were careful with money. We paid off our house in Maricopa County in 2019. We had savings, a modest investment account Frank's father had left him. When Frank passed from a heart attack 3 years ago, I inherited everything, and everything amounted to just over $400,000 in total assets, including the house. I thought my son and I would lean on each other after Frank died. We had always been close. He called me every Sunday without fail. He drove up from Phoenix to help me sort Frank's belongings, and he cried in the hallway when he found his father's old baseball glove. I trusted him completely. His wife is a different matter. I want to be fair. I don't think she was always this way. Or maybe she was, and I simply chose not to see it. She is smart, polished, and very good at making you feel like the problem is always yours. She works in marketing. She knows how to frame things. The first time she asked me for money, 2 months after Frank's funeral, she framed it as, "We just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed managing everything alone." What she meant was, "Can we have access to your accounts so we can help you?" I said no to that one. I should have paid more attention to my own reaction. The requests evolved. They were never vulgar or blunt. They came wrapped in context. My son was between contracts. He worked in residential solar installation, and the slow season had hit hard. Could I help with the mortgage for a couple months? Of course I could. He was my son. Then the baby came, and suddenly private preschool was a priority, not a luxury. And didn't I want my granddaughter to have every advantage? Then came the newer SUV because the old one wasn't safe enough for a car seat, the backyard renovation so the baby would have somewhere to play, and the investment opportunity my son had found that just needed a little startup capital. I gave. Every time I gave. And every time there was a reason it couldn't be repaid just yet. I told myself, this was what parents did. I told myself Frank would have done the same thing. I told myself the requests would slow down once they found their footing. They didn't slow down. Over 22 months, I transferred a total of $163,000 to my son and daughter-in-law. I know the exact number because I went back through every transaction later, sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning with a yellow legal pad, and I wrote down every single one. But the rehearsal dinner is where everything changed. Not all at once, not dramatically, just something inside me went very quiet and very cold. My son and his wife had been together for 6 years. They'd married in a small ceremony in 2021, just immediate family, but they'd always wanted a bigger celebration. When they announced they were finally planning the real wedding, a vow renewal and reception for 120 guests at an event venue outside Scottsdale. I was overjoyed. I offered to contribute toward the flowers and the catering. Another $32,000. My daughter-in-law sent me a list of vendors with prices highlighted. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the ceremony. I drove down from Tucson on a Thursday afternoon, checked into my room at the extended stay motel. Not the hotel where the wedding party was staying, because those rooms were being held for the immediate family. And I had been told mine was already covered before I could offer, and arrived at the venue at 6. The venue was beautiful. String lights over a courtyard, round tables with linen cloths, little succulent centerpieces. My daughter-in-law was everywhere at once, directing the event coordinator, greeting guests, laughing in that way she has where her teeth show but her eyes stay perfectly still. She found me near the entrance. "Oh, you're here," she said, which is a strange thing to say to someone you invited. I was just about to update the seating. "Come look." I followed her to a board near the bar where the chart was mounted. She picked up a marker, found my name at the family table, and drew a line through it. "We're putting the immediate family together here," she said, tapping the center table. "Grandparents, siblings, the wedding party. It's getting crowded. You'll be more comfortable at table 9. The cousins are fun." She smiled at me. Then she walked away to adjust a centerpiece. I stood there for a moment. The cousins at table 9 were my son's second cousins, people I had met twice. I had helped pay for this rehearsal dinner. I had helped pay for the flowers, the catering, the down payment on the venue deposit when they'd needed it quickly 8 months ago. Table 9 was near the kitchen. I smiled at the guests around me, found my seat, and sat through a 4-course dinner making pleasant conversation with people who were kind but strangers. My son was 20 feet away the entire evening. He looked over at me twice. The second time, he raised his glass slightly, and I raised mine back, and that was the extent of it. On the drive back to my motel, I did not cry. I think I had been waiting, without knowing it, for something like this. Some moment clear enough that I couldn't explain it away. Back in my room, I opened my laptop. The next morning, the morning of the wedding, I drove to a strip mall office off the main road and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before going in. I had Googled estate attorney Scottsdale the night before and found one with same-day appointments. Her name was Vanessa. She was about 40, matter of fact, and she did not seem surprised by anything I told her. "Tell me about your current estate plan," she said. My will named my son as primary beneficiary. Everything, the house, the savings, the investment account, would pass to him directly upon my death. There was no trust, no conditions, no protections. "And how much have you transferred to him in the past 2 years?" I slid the legal pad across her desk. She looked at the number without expression. "Has any of it been repaid?" "No. But there was always a reason." She nodded. She had heard this before. "Here's what I can do for you today," Vanessa said. "I can draft a letter of intent that signals a change in your estate plan and is time-stamped for this morning. The formal restructuring, the trust documents, the new will take 2 to 3 weeks. But this letter establishes that as of today, your intentions have changed. If anything were to happen to you in the interim, it creates a record." "Do it," I said. I was back at my motel with 20 minutes to spare before I needed to get dressed for the ceremony. "I want to tell you something about that wedding. It was genuinely beautiful. My son looked happy. My daughter-in-law was radiant. My granddaughter, who was 3, wore a little white dress and scattered flower petals down the aisle with complete seriousness and then immediately ran back to the front to do it again. I laughed out loud. I cried a little too. Loving people and protecting yourself from them are not mutually exclusive. I had to learn that the hard way. I sat at a pew near the back. No one had told me where the family was sitting for the ceremony. 2 weeks after the wedding, I was back in Tucson, and I was sitting across from Vanessa again to sign the completed documents. a revocable living trust in my name with myself as trustee. My home, my savings, my investments, all retitled into the trust. A new will. My granddaughter would receive a fully funded educational trust when she turned 22. A small bequest to the Tucson Food Bank, which Frank had quietly donated to for years. My son received a specific cash amount, enough to matter, not enough to coast on, with the remainder distributed to charitable organizations. I did not tell my son. I found out he knew on a Tuesday morning, 17 days after the documents were signed. My phone rang at 7:45. I was making coffee. Mom? His voice was tight. I just got a notification that you removed me from your investment account. What is going on? I set down my coffee mug. Good morning. Don't do that. Don't be calm right now. I've been trying to reach you. I know. I've been busy. Mom, is this about the rehearsal dinner? Because if it is, she didn't mean it wasn't personal. It was just logistics. The table was. It's not about the rehearsal dinner, I said. It's about 22 months of transfers totaling $163,000 that you have never once made any attempt to repay. Silence. That was family helping family. I had expected that. You said each time it was a loan. I have the texts. Every single one. We'll pay you back when the contract comes through. We'll square it up after the tax return. Just give us until spring. Spring came 3 times. Mom, money in a family. Has your wife ever held a job since the baby was born? Silence again. I saw her LinkedIn last week. She just updated it. Brand director at a regional agency. She's been working for at least 8 months. That's private. You were asking me to cover your mortgage while she was drawing a salary? The silence this time was different. Heavier. We had debts, he finally said. We were trying to catch up. I understand that. What I don't understand is why catching up required me to rearrange my retirement while you redid your backyard and bought a new vehicle. You don't know what our costs are? I know exactly what your costs are. I've been covering them. I heard him exhale. When he spoke again, his voice had flattened out. She wants to come down next weekend. We should all sit down together and talk about this. You're clearly upset, and we want to make sure you're thinking clearly. There it was. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Mom, you're alone down there. You're still grieving Dad. These big financial decisions, we should be involved in those. Why? Because we're your family. We love you. You moved me to table 9. He didn't answer that. I think we should take a break from talking for a little while, I said. I'm going to hang up now. I did. I called my oldest friend that afternoon. Her name is Audrey. We met in graduate school at the University of Arizona in 1982, and she has known me through everything. My wedding, Frank's illness, the worst years of my career. She lives in Albuquerque now. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. The money, the dinner, the seating chart, the phone call. Audrey had been a paralegal before she retired, and she listened the way only a person with legal training listens, without interrupting, cataloging everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a beat. Then she said, Tessa, how long have you been carrying this? I had to think about it. I think since Frank died. You were grieving and you filled it with giving. That's not, yes, probably. They counted on that. She wasn't being cruel. She was being precise. It's not an accident. It's a pattern. They escalated when you were most vulnerable and pulled back just enough when you showed any resistance. You know this. You've seen it in clients for 30 years. I did know it. That was the thing. I'd sat across from families in exactly this dynamic, written case notes about exactly this dynamic, and I'd still walked right into the center of it. You did the right thing with the attorney, Audrey said. Now document everything from that phone call. The following week, my daughter-in-law called. She did not open with anger. She opened with warmth. which told me everything. I just want you to know that we love you and we're worried. The account changes the sudden decisions. You've been through so much since Frank. Grief does strange things to people's judgment. I see. We would never want you to do something you'd regret, something that hurts the family. What specifically are you concerned about? A small pause. She hadn't expected directness. Well, removing Marcus from the estate plan without even discussing it with him. That's a significant decision to make alone. It's my estate. Of course it is. But decisions like that made during a period of emotional stress, she let the sentence trail off in that particular way she has, where the implication does the work. Are you suggesting I'm not competent to manage my own finances? I'm suggesting that you might benefit from having family involved. I have an attorney, a financial advisor, and a physician who would all disagree with that assessment. The warmth left her voice. Tessa, we gave up a lot to be close to you after Frank passed. We included you in our lives. We brought the baby to see you when I paid for the flights. Silence. I'm going to go now, I said. If you have further concerns, you can contact my attorney. I'll give you her information. I forwarded the call notes to Vanessa that evening. What I didn't expect was my granddaughter. About 3 weeks after the phone calls, I answered my door on a Saturday morning and found my daughter-in-law standing on my front step with my granddaughter in her arms. My granddaughter immediately reached for me. I took her without thinking. I thought you might want to see her, my daughter-in-law said. Her voice was soft. Her eyes were calculating. I had seen this exact move used in family court proceedings. Bring the child, watch what happens to the other party's resolve. I kissed my granddaughter's forehead. She smelled like sunscreen and something sweet. Come in, I said. I was not going to have this conversation on my front step. We sat in my living room. My daughter-in-law had prepared. She had a list of the times she'd included me, the holidays, the dinners, the photos she'd sent. She laid them out like evidence, all the ways they had been generous with me. I let her finish. You sent me to table 9, I said. At a dinner I helped finance, while my son sat with people he sees every week. That's the part I keep coming back to. Her jaw tightened. It was a seating chart. You're making it into something it wasn't. Maybe, but I notice you haven't apologized for it. She switched approaches. Marcus has been devastated. He doesn't understand what he did wrong. You're punishing him for my mistake, if it was a mistake. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself from your own son, from a pattern I should have named a long time ago. She stood then, picking up my granddaughter. I hope you understand what you're risking. She's going to grow up not knowing you. I stood too. I hope you understand what you've already cost her. She deserves grandparents who are seen as people, not resources. I would like to be that for her someday. Whether I get to be depends on choices you make, not me. They left. I stood in my living room for a long moment. Then I called Vanessa. Document the visit, Vanessa said. Time, who was present, what was said, everything. She brought the baby. I know. They usually do. A pause. Tessa, are you prepared for the possibility that they escalate? What does escalating look like? Depending on their attorney's advice, a petition questioning your competency. It's rare when the evidence is thin, but it happens. You're a widow. You live alone. You've made sudden large financial changes. They could try to frame it as erratic behavior. I thought about that. What do I need? A formal cognitive evaluation. Your physician on record. And I need you to write down everything. Every request, every transfer, every promise of repayment, every conversation. Dates, amounts, exact words where you can remember them. I spent the next 4 evenings doing exactly that. 61 pages of notes. I had saved every text message because I am at heart still a social worker, and social workers document everything. The evaluation was scheduled with a neuropsychologist named Dr. Okafor at a clinic in Tucson. It took 3.5 hours. Memory, executive function, processing speed, judgment. At the end, Dr. Okafor looked at my results and said, with the particular bluntness of someone who gives this report often, "You're well above average across every domain. There's no indication of any cognitive impairment whatsoever." I drove home and allowed myself, for the first time in weeks, to feel something like steady. They did not file a competency petition. I think Audrey was right. They were acting on fear, not strategy, and when they saw the documentation my attorney had assembled, the fear curdled into something quieter. The calls stopped. The texts slowed to nothing. What came instead, 2 months later, was a letter from my son. Not from both of them. From him alone, his handwriting, which I would know anywhere because I watched it develop from crayon loops to careful cursive over 30 years. He wrote that he was sorry, not sorry in the lawyerly way his wife operated, where the apology comes wrapped in conditions. He wrote that he had looked at the numbers, really looked at them, and he didn't know how he had let it go on so long. He wrote that he had spent a long time blaming her, and then a longer time understanding that he had made every choice alongside her, and that was harder to sit with. He wrote that he had started seeing a therapist, that they both had individually, that the marriage was in a difficult place, that he missed his father, that he missed me. He didn't ask for anything. I read the letter 4 times. I put it in the drawer of my bedside table under a photograph of Frank. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready, but I held it differently than I had held his wife's overtures. Those had felt like moves in a game. This felt like a person trying to find his way back to himself, which is a different thing entirely. I focused on my own life. Audrey came to visit in the spring, and we drove out to Saguaro National Park and walked until our feet hurt and talked about everything except the situation with my son. It was the best day I'd had in 2 years. I started a small ceramics class at the community center on Wednesday mornings. I had never done anything artistic in my life. My first bowl looked like something a child made in a rainstorm. My instructor, a cheerful retired teacher named Bev, and she insisted on Bev, not Beverly, told me it had character. I kept it. I had lunch once a week with a woman I'd met at my church's grief support group, Gloria, who had lost her husband 18 months before I lost Frank. We did not talk about grief at lunch. We talked about books and terrible television and the best green chili in Tucson, which is a subject Arizonans take seriously. Having a friend who knew what the weight felt like without requiring me to describe it, that mattered more than I expected. In August, I did something I had been thinking about for 20 years. Frank and I had always meant to go to Europe. We had a folder on the refrigerator, pages torn from travel magazines. Portugal was always at the top. I booked 3 weeks. Lisbon, the Alentejo, the Algarve coast. I went alone. I want to tell you what it felt like to sit on a terrace in Sintra with a glass of local wine, watching the sun go down over the hills, and realize that no one needed anything from me at that moment, and that I didn't feel guilty about it. That was new. The not feeling guilty. I'd spent so long confusing love with availability that I'd forgotten they were not the same thing. My son texted me a photo while I was away. It was my granddaughter at the kitchen table with finger paints, completely covered in blue and red, grinning. He wrote under it, "She asks about you." I tell her, "You're on an adventure." I looked at that photo for a long time. When I got home from Portugal, I wrote him back. Not an email, a letter with a pen, on paper, because that's how we used to talk when he was at college, and everything felt more true that way. I told him I had received his letter. I told him that I was not ready to pretend the last 2 years hadn't happened, but that I was also not interested in holding on to it forever. I told him that I had spent my career watching families destroy each other over money and pride, and I had no interest in adding ours to that list. I told him that any relationship going forward would need to look different from what came before, that I was not a source of funding, I was his mother, and if he wanted a mother, I was here. I told him I wanted to know my granddaughter. His response came in 4 days. He would agree to anything I needed. He was in family counseling with his wife. They were working on it. He knew it would take time. He was asking for a chance to show me, not just tell me. I called Vanessa to update her. She was genuinely pleased in the measured way of attorneys who are pleased without becoming sentimental. You should know, she said, the estate plan stands as is. This isn't contingent on reconciliation. Your trust is your trust. I know, I said. That's not why I'm doing it. I know it's not. That's why I'm telling you it's okay. I saw my granddaughter for the first time since that morning on my front step in late October. My son drove her down on a Saturday without his wife, which felt like the right first step. We spent 4 hours in my backyard. I had bought a little plastic slide at a second-hand store and set it up by the mesquite tree. She went down it 47 times. I counted because she counted loudly and required verification. When they left, my son hugged me at the door. He held on longer than usual. Neither of us said anything. I've thought a lot about what I want people to take from this, if anything. I'm not sure I have a tidy lesson. What I know is this: I spent 2 years giving money in place of something else I didn't know how to give. The demand that I be seen as a person with her own needs, her own grief, her own worth, that had nothing to do with her bank account. That wasn't entirely their fault. I had trained them. When I finally stopped, it cost me something real. There were months where I wasn't sure I would get my son back. I'm still not entirely sure what I have back or whether it will hold. But I'm no longer afraid of finding out. The ceramics class is going well. My fourth bowl actually looks like a bowl. Bev says I'm a natural, which is generous, but I'll take it. I booked a trip to the Azores for April. And every Sunday morning, my phone rings. My son's voice. No agenda. Just, how was your week, Mom? Did you finish the book? Did it rain down there? It's not everything, but it's real. And real, I have learned, is worth more than everything you can give to keep the peace. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you have ever felt more like a resource than a person in your own family, I hope you'll leave a comment below, and I hope you'll share this with someone who might need to hear it. Now tell me, what would you have done? Would you have drawn the line sooner, or would the love have kept you giving longer? I'd really love to know. Take care of yourselves, friends. Until next time. I've been a social worker for over 3 decades. I spent my career sitting across from people in the worst moments of their lives, helping them name what was happening to them, helping them find the language for things they had been told weren't real. And still, I couldn't see it when it was happening at my own kitchen table. I think about that a lot, not with shame anymore, but with a kind of honest curiosity. How does a person who knows all the patterns miss the one playing out in her own home? I think the answer is love, not weakness. Love. I wanted so badly for my son to be okay after we lost Frank. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to matter. And they understood that about me, whether they were conscious of it or not. And they leaned into it every time with another request, another reason, another promise. What I gave them wasn't just money. It was proof that I was still needed. That cost me $163,000 over 22 months, and it nearly cost me myself. What changed everything wasn't the seating chart at that rehearsal dinner, though that was the moment I finally let myself see clearly. What changed everything was a decision I made alone in a motel room in Scottsdale. at 11 o'clock at night to stop explaining my own pain away. I'd spent 2 years finding reasons why each request made sense, why my daughter-in-law didn't really mean it that way, why my son was just under pressure. The night I stopped doing that, the night I let the hurt be real instead of manageable, that was the night I started getting my life back. Vanessa told me once, early on, that the people who end up in her office are almost never greedy or foolish. They're usually loving, usually generous, usually people who were raised to believe that family comes first and that keeping the peace is its own kind of virtue. What no one tells you is that peace kept at the cost of your dignity isn't peace. It's just a quieter kind of losing. My son is finding his way back to me. I don't know yet what that will look like in 5 years or 10. I know that my granddaughter went down that plastic slide 47 times in my backyard, and I know that she counted every single one out loud, and I know that I was there to hear it. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Audrey said something to me once that I keep coming back to. She said that the people who exploit your love are counting on you being too ashamed to draw the line, ashamed of needing something in return, ashamed of saying this is not enough, and I deserve more. The courage to draw that line isn't selfishness, is the most honest form of self-respect there is, and self-respect, I have learned, is not something you find after you've protected yourself. It is what makes protecting yourself possible in the first place. I'm going to the Azores in April. I have a ceramic bowl on my shelf that actually looks like a bowl, and every Sunday morning my phone rings. That's enough. That's more than enough.